Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Let's Chat Reality. I'm Michael,
And I'm Molly.
and today we are so excited. It's been a big week of premieres, and we have two of our favorite shows to talk about that just started this past week. We have The Traitors Season 3 and Deal or No Deal Island, affectionately known as Dondi, Season 2. So, a lot of big moments, a lot of big shows to talk about. So, I am so excited to get started. What about you, Molly?
Yes, it was an exciting week that we had, so I'm excited to dive in.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's go ahead and get started then with The Traitors. Highly anticipated premiere. We had the cast revealed quite a while back when they started filming, and we've been anxiously awaiting it to start. And here we are with three episodes. Before we get started, what were your initial thoughts on the cast? I know we talked about it when they first dropped, but kind of going into it, as we see the cast pull up, as they drive up to the castle, what are your thoughts as you start these three episodes here?
I was really excited. First of all, Carolyn was my favorite from Survivor, so I was so excited to see her again, as well as Gabby. And so I already had like in my mind like some of my favorite people to watch on TV coming back. So I was having a high expectation of this season, and I feel like so far it's been delivering, so that's been exciting. But going into it, I was so excited about this cast, so I was really anticipating this season. What about you?
Yeah, no, I think like what's always really interesting to me about traders is kind of twofold. It's like seeing the people who have previous relationships going into it. Like I was really interested to see Danielle and Brittany because they had a little bit of an ordeal on Big Brother Reindeer Games, which was filmed, I believe, about a year prior to this season. And I was really interested to see. Oh no, I guess that was filmed. Wait, let me think. This was filmed that was probably only like 6 months before, so it was relatively recent, I guess, at the time when they filmed this. But it's been about a year now, so I was really interested to see what their dynamic was going to be, which we pretty much got right away. I mean, we got them interacting right when they first pull up to the castle. But then I'm also really interested always to see how these people who don't know each other from totally different sides of the universe, the Bravos are going to react to the gamers and who they're going to get along with, who they aren't. And so that's always really fascinating to me. So I love the premiere of Traders always because that's when we get those moments. We get to see people's first impressions of each other. And so that's always a really fun part about this show to me. So yeah, super excited for this. And I thought it was actually like, I feel like in my mind, I was thinking that I was less excited slightly than last season. But as we get to the premiere, I was so excited. Like any of that, like slight disappointment, maybe of the caliber of the cast, totally went away. And actually, I think now that I look at this cast, really, like it's a really impressive, great cast again.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. And I mean, we get a lot of Survivor people, which was exciting. 'Cause I feel like there weren't as many Survivor people in the past casts as much as this one.
Yeah, I think this season is more Survivor heavy than last season. I mean, last
Mm.
season we had Parvati and Sandra, of course. I did we have any other survivors besides them last
I
season? I
don't
don't think
think
so. We
so.
had some big brothers, Dan and Janelle,
Yeah.
but yeah, I don't think we had any other survivors last season. So this season we have 4, which is definitely
Yeah.
definitely more than we had in the past. So, but last season we also had a few challenge people, which we did end up getting one this season, but in this initial cast there weren't any. So they kind of added a couple more Big Brother and survivors, it seems like, to kind of make up for that.
Yeah. And I know those better. So I like that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, going back a little bit to Danielle and Brittany, what were your thoughts on their interaction here? Were you surprised that there was still that animosity from Reindeer Games, or did you think, kind of as you saw them interact here, that this is something that they'll be able to get over and work together, or that they were going to maybe try to get each other out early on?
Yeah, I feel like if you have someone that you already are going into it with like already kind of the animosity there, that's not ideal, obviously. And I thought they would probably make up because like you don't want to start out a game like that where you already are just like not totally sure you can trust someone. Like you want to build up trust, especially with someone that you already knew. Like you could probably move past it, like with JT and or no T C CT. I always
CT.
CT and Janelle from last season. So it was like because they weren't like as close before they got there. Or what wasn't their relationship like kind of rocky, right? Like,
Who? Who?
CT and,
Trishelle?
Janelle. Yeah,
CT and Trishelle, yeah, had a
yeah. Oh,
rocky
sorry,
past.
Trishelle.
Yeah,
I
I know
was
it's Trishelle and Janelle were both on last
yeah,
season, but yeah, Trishelle and CT were the 2 challengers who had a history.
yeah,
And yeah, they had a rocky past. Like, I mean, I think it was more so that Trishelle and Johnny did because
mm,
but it was really both of them, honestly, because I mean, she named both of them. Like, there was an interview that she had done with Jemmy a couple of years prior to that season, I think during like COVID times, and Jemmy was asking her like, "Would you ever come back to the challenge? Or like, why did you leave?" And basically, Trishelle said that. I mean, she name dropped either both CT or Johnny, or maybe just Johnny, but I think name dropped both of them as being the reason that she felt bullied by them, and like that she would never come back as long as they were on. And I mean, so the fact that she's doing that show now with both of them there and now they're very friendly, it seems like that
mm,
all is forgiven. So, but it was kind of crazy to see her be willing to come on with the both of them. But
yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's what I, like, kinda wanted to see more of, like, reconciliation there, but and we'll have to see, like, throughout the season. I feel like we haven't seen a ton of Brittany right now, honestly,
I know. It
I
really
don't know
does
what
seem
she's
like.
even thinking, like, I'm like, I haven't talked to her, or, like, in the show, like, I'm like, what's she doing?"
Yeah, it feels like a lot of their relationship we're getting from Danielle's perspective right now, which makes sense because, I mean, spoiler alert, Danielle's a traitor. So
Yeah,
we're going to just naturally see more of the traitors on this show than you are of some of the faithfuls. But yeah, it seems like Brittany is very much kind of under the radar at this point, which I mean, it's a big cast. It's 23 people that we have. So some people are just going to end up flying under the radar, but I'm a little surprised that Brittany is just because she has such good confessionals. Like her confessional game's on point, and so you feel like someone like that they are going to use heavily for those. And we do get some of them, but I really don't know like who she's close with in the castle, or kind of if people are at all. It doesn't seem like they're suspicious of her from what we're seeing, but you never know. I feel like you get interviews all the time on this show, especially I remember last season getting a bunch of people like had podcasts or went on podcasts during the season. They were like, I knew it was Dan the whole time, or I knew Parvati from the beginning. And it's like, well, I mean, maybe you did, but we didn't see that.
yeah,
So you never know. I know Brittany is doing like something on her Patreon where she's giving all sorts of her behind the scenes feedback. Because I have not watched or listened to any of that, but maybe somebody has. Let us know in the comments. If you've heard any of her takes. But yeah, so we then, as everybody pulls up to the castle, we get our first twist revealed where Boston Rob Mariano from Survivor has the opportunity to join the game if somebody is willing to step forward and choose to eliminate somebody else. So he's basically, in order for him to join, he would have to take the place of somebody else. And so if somebody decides that they would rather have Boston Rob there than somebody else who maybe they have issues with going into the game, or are, just kind of wanting to get out because they think they'll be a dangerous player, then they have the opportunity to do that and replace them with Rob. So what were your thoughts on this twist? Were you surprised that nobody ended up stepping forward? What were your thoughts about all that?
yeah, I feel like the twist was a little pointless, like, I didn't think anyone was gonna step up because it's first of all, like, you don't even really know the cast yet, and so you don't want that strong target on your back right off the bat. And I feel like, especially because Boston Rob also is like such a strong player, like no one wanted to see him in the game anyways. Like they weren't gonna if it was someone like maybe that they were like best friends with, someone in the cast, like maybe then someone would feel more strongly, but for Boston Rob, like no one was gonna do that. So it didn't really make sense in my opinion. Like they could have even cut that out. Like I don't because then spoiler also he still comes back. So it's like what was the point that you had to like try to get some other players to scheme already? Like I don't know. It just kind of was pointless.
Yeah, to me this was a lose-lose situation because
Yeah.
like you either somebody steps forward and cuts out somebody who we're never going to get a chance to see at all on the show. Like I mean it's like why would you risk somebody like bringing somebody all the way out here, getting all the fans excited about them, and then having them leave. Like, unless it's Tom Sandoval, I don't want that.
Yeah.
So, like, and then if they don't decide to do it, then it's completely pointless. Like you said, like they did, like it was just a complete waste of time. And we all knew, and I'm sure they knew too, they're not going to fly Boston Rob all the way out there just to let him go home right away. Like, you know that something's going to happen. And I'm sure anyone that was even contemplating stepping forward, like whether Carolyn, Jeremy, Tony, like if somebody who knew him decided that they, like maybe were thinking about it for a second, uh, I think they would know that they're going to find a way to bring him into the game. Like, they're not going to let him just go home like that. So, like, why bother? Is what
Yeah.
I would say. But like you said, we do still get him, but we'll get to that a little bit later. But before he ends up coming back, we do get our traitors chosen. So everybody sits around the table, and Alan walks around and taps three people on the shoulders, and it ends up being Danielle Reyes from Big Brother, Carolyn Weiger from Survivor, and Bob the Drag Queen from RuPaul's Drag Race. So, what were your thoughts on those picks?
I was excited to see Carolyn, first of all. I was so excited. It was also interesting to see the conversations that they were having with Alan, like before he chose the traders, that people were trying to have a case essentially of being like, oh, I want to be the trader. And so obviously Carolyn got what she wished for.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, obviously, I think like having Danielle as well as one of the traders, because we saw Dan last year as like one of the big brother players, also a trader. So I feel like it makes sense to pick another big brother person. And Bob the drag queen, I feel like has such a big personality, so it's been really fun watching him as a trader so far too. But I think those choices all made sense to me.
Yeah, I thought they were three really good choices. Like, I felt like Danielle Reyes, how do you have somebody like Danielle in the game and not make her a traitor? Like, that's just like based on her Big Brother gameplay, it just makes sense. Like, that she's perfect for this role. Bob the Drag Queen, I think also great pick. It was a lot of people, I feel like, going into the season were saying that they were hoping that the Drag Queen would be a traitor. I don't watch a ton of RuPaul's Drag Race, so I don't have a ton of background on him. But from what everybody was saying, I mean, everybody was so hyped to hopefully see him as a traitor. So I was excited to see that. And then Carolyn, I mean, just such an interesting choice. Like, I felt like I kept going back and forth. Like, do I think that Carolyn as a traitor would work, or would she just be so obvious about it? But I think it seems like the fact that she is just kind of her personality, like just normally, is so kind of all over the place and hyper that it's like nothing changes when she becomes a traitor. So it's not suspicious because that's just how she was the whole time before that. So I think it's genius. And she's been probably honestly doing the best job of all three so far.
Yeah.
Nobody's suspecting her. And I think a lot of her opinions about like who to murder each episode are right. Like, I find myself agreeing with Carolyn probably more than any of the other two.
Yeah.
So I think three great choices. The only thing that I would say is that I think the fact that there's no Bravo people in the turret is a little bit, it makes it hard for the Bravo people because it's so easy for them to pick them off because the three of them just don't have any relationship with any of the Bravo people. So it's like they're very easy murders for them because they're not their closest allies. And for the Bravo fans, I think that's kind of disappointing to see them going home early on.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm excited to see what's gonna happen throughout the season.
Yeah, and I think, like, for the meta of the game in general, it's probably good to not always have, like, one Bravo person, one CBS person, one MTV person, whatever. Like, that's gonna make it really easy in the future to just kind of assume that that's always gonna be the case. Whereas now not having anybody from Bravo, it's like, oh, they could all be from one sector or, have a whole, like, group of people not represented in there. So I think it makes it for the future a little bit more difficult to assume what they're gonna do. But
Yeah, for
I
sure.
always kind of, there's a part of me that always wishes it was random. Because I think
Yeah.
then, like, there's no assumption of it has to be one person here, or, you're not gonna have, like, 3 women be traitors or 3 men. Like, I think that would solve a little bit of that, but then you might kind of be disappointed by who ends up being chosen. But I don't know, it might be worth it.
Yeah, that would be interesting if they tried that one season. Like, maybe they give it as a test, like, try out, like, just doing it randomly, and seeing how that turns out, but I feel like it's fun when Alan does choose them, though.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I think they should absolutely still do, like, the, patting on the back and the whole ceremony of it, but, like, in terms of, like well, yeah, but then you wouldn't get, like, the talks with Alan, like, "Oh, do you hope to be a traitor?" Like, that was and I loved the moment with Sandoval where
Oh
he
my
was like
gosh.
that was amazing, where he was like, if I chose you as a traitor, would you feel like I betrayed you?" And he's like, "Yeah, I would." And he's like, "Doesn't feel so good, does it?" That was good.
That was my favorite part of that
That was a
episode.
great line.
That was so good.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Tom Sandoval, he takes that blindfold off as quickly as humanly possible and just stares everyone down, and immediately is suspicious of Chriselle Staus from Selling Sunset because he thinks that she started talking a lot and looking nervous and was doing too much. And he tells that to Dylan Efron, who then goes to Chriselle immediately and tells her that Tom said this about her. Then Chriselle starts to speculate that maybe this is because she is friends with Ariana, and obviously Tom's ex, and that maybe this is some sort of revenge trying to get her out and sabotage her game. Do you think that that is potentially true?
I don't think it's because of Ariana. I think it was just he doesn't really like Chriselle. Like
Hmm.
I just think in general because Chriselle's already kind of been calling him out on other stuff. And they probably have cut other parts of the conversations out that we've seen some of it of her being like, "Well, I don't want to be around you," basically. So I think like he just wants her out because he doesn't like her in general, not because it's because of her being friends with his ex.
Yeah, I mean, I think I don't know that it's because like it's a weird thing. Like it's not necessarily that it's because she's friends with Ariana and he's like trying to punish her for that, but I think there's potential that he in his mind he's like, well, Chriselle's friends with Ariana, so she's going to be after me, so
Yeah.
I want to be after her. If
Mhm.
that makes sense. So I think like
Yeah, he's
yes,
trying
in
to
the end
just
of the
get
day it
ahead of it,
is because
basically.
of that potentially,
Yeah.
but it's like slightly different reasoning maybe than like what Chriselle's thinking, but I think it's certainly possible that he's looking at her a lot harder than everybody else because he knows that there's that relationship there that she probably already is going into this not liking him.
Yeah.
And who can blame
Yeah, I
her?
mean, most people don't
Yeah.
like him, so I
Yeah.
think
That's
that's
like
not
the opposite of what he said about
yeah.
Ariana, where she's, at the round table, she's like, I'm friends with Ariana. And he's like, who isn't? Everybody's friends with Ariana. And it's like, well, look in the mirror.
Yeah.
There's a reason that everybody is on Ariana's side besides Lala and Sheena. So,
Yeah. But it kind of is, even though I don't like Tom, but I think it is kind of fun seeing him in the traders like environment because like he doesn't have any power. Obviously, he's not a trader, so he's now just like on his toes, like trying to figure it out, and like thinks he could get murdered, which is like kind of funny. But then, and also, I feel like in general, like the cast isn't really wanting to hang out around him, so he's kind of getting like a little bit like that treatment that he deserves. So I kind
mhm.
of like it.
Yeah, I mean, it was great watching him come in and then having immediately Gabby and who was Gabby with?
I think Chriselle,
No, it
no,
was
Nikki.
Nikki, thank you. I was like,
Oh,
I
okay.
could picture her and I couldn't think of her name. She's like one of the only ones that I really didn't know going into this. But
Okay.
yeah, it was Gabby and Nikki, and they were like, Gabby was like, "Oh my god, that's Tom Sandoval," and he's like, "I'm not going to go talk to him. Like, I'm not going to say hi." So yeah, moments like that are pretty good, and then the moments like that. Chriselle's had a few good moments, like when she voted for Tom and said a traitor needs to be deceptive and good at lying and backstabbing, and I know you possess all these traits, so I
Yeah,
think you could be a traitor. I was like, I know you're wrong, but yes, get him, Chriselle.
I
Get him
know.
again.
I mean, there's gonna be more votes for him, hopefully. So maybe we'll get more of him getting called out for that again.
I know. I want him to go before Chriselle. I want for every moment that Tom is there, I want Chriselle to be there too to keep him in line.
Yes.
So that's my hope for this season. But For the we get to the first mission, and the mission is that everybody has to row a Viking vessel to various pontoons and collect containers of fuel. They have to collect all the fuel and return to set ablaze a ring of fire. So everybody that is within that ring of fire at the end ends up getting a shield. But on other pontoons, there are up to $40,000 worth chests of gold, and anything brought back will be added to the pot. So at every pontoon, they must leave two people behind. So those people that are left behind are the only ones that are potentially up for murder at the next night. So at the first pontoon, they get there, and Robin and Ayan from the Housewives, Robin's from Potomac, Ayan's from Dubai, they decide to stay at the first pontoon, followed by Dolores and Dorinda, the other two housewives of Jersey and New York. They leave at the next one. And there was a good moment there where I think it was Dolores realizes as soon as they start rowing away, they're like, oh shoot, everybody's going to think that we're traitors because we're willing to stay behind and potentially be up for murder, because if we're traitors we can't be murdered. So it was kind of funny to watch the housewives like learn the game as it goes along, because
Yeah.
the CBS people, the gamers, are pick it up, very easily because they're used to these types of shows. But I mean, we've seen, in past seasons that housewives, it takes a little bit longer because they're just not used to this and they probably don't watch these shows, so it takes a little while for them to really kind of get their bearings in the game.
Yeah. No, I love that part. She was like, "Oh, no. They're gonna suspect us now."
Yeah. And the following one, it gets a little bit harder because people aren't really willing to stay behind and potentially be up for murder. And, there starts to be this conversation of like, all the women are leaving behind and there's only going to be women up for murder. So, like, one of the guys needs to stay behind. But the guys are kind of unwilling to do it because they're saying, well, we need to be the ones to row the boat. Like, we're not going to get there fast enough if it's all the women are rowing. Women can't drive. Like, I mean, this is feels like the 1950s.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't like that part. I was like, "Okay, like, you guys we can row too. Women can row."
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, Nikki is probably the strongest person there. I mean,
yeah.
there's plenty of people, plenty of the women are fine, and there's gonna be, like, there's only 10 people that are going to possibly have to stay behind. So I mean, there's going to be guys for the majority of it regardless. Like, you're not going to eliminate all the guys. So, like, there's going to be at least a handful of guys left up there, even if a couple of them stay behind now at this point. So,
Yeah.
like, I think you're going to be fine. But yeah,
Yeah.
so it ends up that Danielle volunteers, and as well as Bob the drag queen, which is really funny because they're both traders, but they don't know it because the traders haven't met each other yet. So they're performing for each other on this pontoon that they're so upset and they're going to be up for murder. And little do they know that they're both traders.
Yeah. No, that part was so funny because I was happy to see that traders did go on the pontoon. I was like, I feel like one of the traders has to.
Yeah.
And Danielle's like fake crying. Like she really was playing that well.
Yeah.
And at
It's
least
a
in
little
that
over
part.
the top, but I
Yeah.
don't know. Maybe that's just because we know. Maybe if she wasn't, we wouldn't know that. But to me, I was like, "Oh, Danielle, don't overdo it."
Yeah. Well, for that part of it, I feel like it made sense. But the more crying she's doing, like that's when I think it's more of the
When
over the
she gets
top.
back to the castle, yeah.
Yeah. But and then Bob the drag queen, because they were like, "We need a guy," like, he's like, "Okay, like, I'll do it," because no other guys were doing it, so
Yeah. It seemed
that
like
was
the Bobs were the real vocal ones about that.
yeah,
But at the last pontoon, two guys do end up being left behind: Sam Asghari, Britney Spears' ex, and Bob Harper from The Biggest Loser. So they end up staying behind there, but they end up being the last ones because the rest of everybody on the boat basically decides that they're not going to go for the last pontoon. They're not going to go for the last chest of money, and they're going to turn around now because nobody else was willing to stay behind. So, do you think, if you're a faithful, let's just say we're faithfuls, would you have been willing to be left behind there to go, so that they could accumulate the most money for the pot, or would you have been unwilling to do that?
I don't think I would have wanted to go, but then I feel like in the moment, I maybe would have felt pressured and then gone off on the pontoon, but for I would probably have remained, like, wanting to stay on the pontoon or on the boat itself.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know that they ever could have gotten me off there because, like, honestly, I don't care. Like, adding money to the pot, fine. Like, I think there's a chance that at the end of the season, they're going to have a challenge that lets you add, whatever was left behind in earlier challenges. They did that season 1. Can't remember if they did that season 2, but I feel like that's a future problem, and, right now, I just don't wanna be murdered, so if I'm a faithful, I'm not getting off of that, and honestly, if I'm a traitor, I'm probably not either because I don't want, to be suspicious in that way, so I think I'm staying on that boat and getting the shield for myself.
Yeah.
But everybody who sacrificed themselves then comes back to the castle, and they're all upset that the rest of them didn't wait to eat dinner before they got there, and they just have the scraps left behind. And of course, even more upset, like we said, that they didn't go to the final pontoon and they still had 20 minutes left, so they had plenty of time to do it, but couldn't get anyone agreed to stay behind, so they all just went back. I can understand how, like, everybody who did decide to sacrifice themselves would be upset about it. I totally get that. It's like, well, now we have a 1 in 8 chance of being murdered, whereas I did this under the assumption that I would have a 1 in 10 chance of being murdered. So,
Mhm.
I can understand that, but, yeah, I think in this part, like, you just kinda have to be selfish and hope that nobody's gonna focus on you being upset with you for doing it when there's, like, 12 other people there that also made the same decision. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it was hard. I feel like if it was, like, only, like, one person trying to do that decision, it would have been a lot more like, "Okay, like, why didn't you do that?" But because it was such a big group of people, then it didn't make
mhm.
sense.
Yeah. Well, at the end of the episode here, the traders meet each other for the first time, and it is revealed after that Boston Rob will be coming in back into the game as a trader. And alongside him will be two reality TV legends, competition reality TV legends specifically, Wes Bergman from The Challenge and Derek Levasseur from Big Brother 16 that will both be joining the game just as faithfuls. And they are all going to be joining at the next challenge, the next mission. So, what were your thoughts when you saw that Boston Rob was coming back as a traitor and saw the other two there be announced? What were your thoughts on all three of them joining the game here?
I wasn't surprised to see Rob as a traitor. I felt like when they brought him in, like, in the beginning of it, when they were trying to get him someone to sacrifice themselves or sacrifice someone else, that, like, he was gonna have to come back. Like, I knew it wasn't just, like,
Yeah,
that's his only chance of being in the game. But then I was excited to see that Wes and Derek were there, and I'm glad that the 3 of them all came in together because then, like, I guess now, I mean, they like Wes is smart and he's like, or maybe it was Derek who said it, but they're both smart. But they were like, oh, well, one of us is probably a traitor. So like they're trying to stick together so that they're all on each other's sides there.
yeah,
So that like whoever is the one of the three, which we know is Rob, but Wes and Derek don't know that for sure.
yeah.
That like they'll stick together in that way too. So I was excited to see them coming in and I feel like they're gonna be great for the game.
Yeah, I mean, look, these are three, like I said, these are three legends. I think my only disappointment a little bit is like these are almost three of the same people, like in different fonts. Like I mean, they're very similar in a lot of ways, and it's three guys, it's three alpha guys that are coming into the game to like replace Dorinda Medley. Like it's kind of I don't know. Individually I'm excited to see each of them, but I think like the three of them coming in here, kind of this like bro mentality that we already kind of had on the boat. It's like, oh god, now we have three more guys joining the game that are going to be like broing out all season long. So I don't know. I'm excited, but I was a little bit kind of like, oh, I would have liked to see like one girl joined the game, one woman, from I don't know who. There's so many reality TV legends out there that could have joined the three of them, and I think felt like they fit in there. So I don't know. I had kind of mixed feelings about it, I guess, but I mean, I'm excited. Like Derek, we haven't seen play a game like this in 11 years, so I'm really excited about him. I would say of the 3, probably specifically because I feel like we've said for so long that Derek played such an amazing game on season 16, of course, but he was playing against not the strongest cast. Like, he didn't have the biggest opposition that season, although multiple of them have gone on. I mean, Nicole Franzel and Frankie, like, they've gone on to have great reality TV careers after that. And I mean, Amber's won the challenge. So, but in that season, he just ran the game with with basically no uh, fight against him. But so I think I'm interested to see this season now. He's playing with a bunch of other great reality TV legends here. I'm excited to see how he stacks up.
Yeah. No, I agree. I mean, I didn't watch him on Big Brother, but I've heard so much about him that I feel like I know him.
Hmm.
But so I'm excited to see how this goes. But I do agree that we probably should have had one female in the mix there. I hadn't thought about that until you mentioned that, to be honest. But yeah, because it was just very male heavy.
Yeah. But we see that the next morning at breakfast, start of episode 2 here, it is revealed that Dorinda Medley was the first person to be murdered, like we said. And very sad. I mean, I was so upset about this because Dorinda is just such a good character and would have been so entertaining this season.
Mhm.
And I mean, it was just such a loss, I feel like, to get rid of somebody like Dorinda this early on in the game. But do you think that it was a good choice for the traders to get her out at this point?
No, I was sad to see her go as well. I mean, I don't watch her on Real Housewives, but I've heard a lot about her as well. And so I feel like Carolyn had the best point there. She was like, "Well, people are gonna suspect her anyways because she's so loud and like has these opinions that she could be a shield." But Danielle wasn't wanting to hear that argument, and so Carolyn was just like, "Okay, I guess we can do Dorinda." But I
Mhm.
think Carolyn was right to try to push back against getting her out, but Carolyn didn't win that fight, so Dorinda got sent home, or not. You got killed essentially. She got murdered by the Traitors. But yeah, I was sad because I wanted to see her more in the season because I've heard so much about her that I was excited to see her, and then it got stripped away right away.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Dorinda is chaos. Dorinda is going to cause drama. She was already in a bit of a feud with Lord Ivar Mountbatten, and I feel like that probably would have continued a bit throughout the next week or two there. And I think why get rid of somebody who's such a distraction? And I think that probably getting rid of Robin would have been a bit of a better choice for them.
Mhm,
And, Robin is kind of, I feel like it's all the same perks that they were saying about getting out Dorinda,
mhm.
but you don't lose that chaos. So I think that probably would have been the smarter choice there. But they didn't listen to Carolyn. So Dorinda is murdered here. And after that, Wells and Robin have a conversation where Wells says he thinks that murdering Dorinda was not a smart move by the traitors, but Robin disagrees and thinks it was brilliant. So this conversation makes them both suspect each other, which is so interesting.
Yeah.
But who, if you were listening into that conversation, would you have been suspect of either of them, or which one do you think you would have been more suspicious of leaving that conversation?
Um, I think I would have been more suspicious of Robin, probably. I just think, like, her arguments weren't as strong, or, like, or, like, in general. I mean, maybe I would have agreed. I don't know. In the setting you're in, like, you're just, like, thinking about a lot of things. So, in general, I just feel like if I were a trader, I wouldn't wanna be talking about the moves, like, literally right afterwards also, so I would suspect that we were both faithfuls first. Like, I'd be like, "Oh, well, I guess, like, because, like, they also are like, analyzing this move, like, this is, like, someone who I can trust," but they were thinking it in the opposite way, like, "Oh, well, you don't
Yeah.
trust anyone here, and they're talking about the game, and that move that was not s that was good or not good," like, that's it's like obviously clues in their opinion of like, "Oh, this could be mean something," which I feel like every single thing people are doing, they try to get take it as a clue, and I'm like, maybe they're really just thinking about the game, and that's what they were doing here, just they had different opinions because Wells thinks it wasn't smart, which we agree with that, or I agree with that, but then Robin thinks it was, and then, like so, like, people have opinions, like, and that's what happens in a show like this, so it was
Yeah.
just kinda funny to me.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think if either of them I was suspicious of, which I don't know if this would make me more or less suspicious, but I think maybe I would be a little bit more suspicious of Wells just because I don't think anyone would be stupid enough to defend the trader's decision publicly if they were a traitor. Like that
Yeah.
just feels like such an obvious dumb thing to do if you're a traitor. So I think that I might be more suspicious of Wells just because I could see somebody as a traitor going a little trying to go a little overboard to convince people they're not a traitor by saying what they're doing is dumb.
Yeah.
So, I
Yeah.
think
I was
that I
thinking
could
that
maybe see a
too, but then
little
I was
bit
like,
more.
well, I kinda wanted to support Wells there, but I
Yeah, you gotta support your Bachelor Nation fam.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I just don't think that I would probably be that suspicious of either of them just because of that if they weren't doing other things that were also suspicious. But
Yeah.
then at the next mission, Derek, Wes, and Rob are revealed to the rest of the players, and this mission is the three of them are dangled for in cages in the woods, and the players must collect coins from the forest and bring them back to deposit them in one of the three collectors that each of them has in front of their cage. So each time they put a coin, their cage is slightly lowered to the ground, and then once the collector is full, they're on the ground and have then by process joined the game technically. So what did you think of this mission? Was there any sort of strategy that you feel like you would be in terms of whose collector you would put your coins in, or would you just kind of randomly sort them?
I think I would just do one in each one each time I would come back. Like, I don't want anyone to, like, think I was choosing a favorite. So I feel like there wasn't totally that much strategy related to this game.
Yeah. I think, like, if I had an equal no relationship with any of them, I would probably do that. If I was coming from Survivor, I would probably put mine in Rob's. If I was coming from, Big Brother, I might put it in Derek's. Just like, if you have any sort of, like, pre-existing relationship, I think I would just go with that person just to be, like, kind of as a signal of, "Hey, I wanna work with you," "We'll do this together," or "Big Brother strong," or whatever. So I think that would be my only strategy. But knowing those three, like you trying to favor green favor by just putting it in the same person's every time, they don't care. Like these players are much smarter than that. They're not going to get fooled by somebody trying to do that to curry favor with them.
Yeah.
But then we get to the first roundtable, and Bob the Drag Queen and Robin start things off by accusing Wells of being a traitor. Sandoval then accuses Chriselle, followed by Sierra and Dolores accusing Lord Ivar. And then lastly, Danielle thinks that she thinks a housewife might be a traitor and specifically points out Robin. So there's a lot of accusations going on, a lot of chaos at this first roundtable. It's a pretty good one. I mean, for a first
Yeah.
roundtable, I feel like there's not usually this much drama.
No, they had a lot of names thrown out. I was like, wow, like I didn't expect that for the first roundtable this season. But I mean, it made for an exciting roundtable because I honestly, going into the votes, I really didn't know who they were going to vote for
Yeah,
and who was going
I
to get
agree.
banished. Yeah.
No, I totally agree. I think that, I mean, it's so hard in this early game because it's like there's nothing to go off of. So it's like every little thing that you can grab onto to be suspicious of somebody, I feel like you're very malleable to like just the last thing that you hear or the first thing that you hear. I feel like just kind of sticks, and it's like I don't have anything to go off of at this point. And so I'm just going to go with whatever I think most other people are going with. And I feel like everyone kind of feels that way. And then it ends up that, I mean, we get a vote like this where it's out of, I think there's 20 votes, I think, because I don't, yeah, because Rob, Wes, and Derek didn't have votes yet. So
Okay.
then I think there were maybe 19 votes because Dorinda was already gone. So yeah, I think there's 19 votes, and five ended up being the majority to get Wells out here. which is
Yeah.
kinda crazy that it came down to Carolyn's vote, a traitor.
Yeah.
And so that was kinda wild that, I mean, one vote going a different direction could have gotten somebody else out here.
Yeah, no, that was crazy, and I was sad that Wells was booted first just because I like Wells and I thought he would have been fun to watch on this season, but I feel like either like we saw last season with Peter going far and like Ari, but like you need to build up more of those relationships and I don't think Wells had as strong of connections with people with like in the beginning of the show and or through the like the first episode only oh not second episode technically but like early on in the season so we're not really seeing him build those connections and his conversation like literally that one conversation he had with Robin that swayed some people to think he could be a traitor that's what
Mhm.
got him out.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Robin did a good job here of her argument. I think
Yeah.
that that was stronger than Wells was. I think Wells was kind of like a little stunned that he was getting all these accusations, so I don't think that
Mhm.
he necessarily had prepared his arguments. And I think Robin did a good job of kind of capitalizing on that and giving a pretty good argument, kind of refuting Wells's accusations there. And I think that probably just kind of swayed people to think that, that others were going to go in that direction against Wells here. So, yeah, I was sad. I mean, I like Wells a lot. I think that he's just maybe not made for this game. And it kind of reminds me of like, remember when we watched The Goat and there was like Tasha and Grocery Store Joe were on that? And like,
Yeah.
I mean, like, Pilot Pete did pretty well last season. Like, there's Bachelor people that have done well, but I think some of them just kind of aren't quite made for this kind of manipulation and strategy shows. So
Yeah.
sad to see him go. But following his banishment, he, of course, reveals that he's a faithful. And then when everybody goes back to the mansion, Derek, Wes, and Rob each have a shield to give out to another player that they got during the mission. So Rob gives his to Tony, which makes sense. Derek gives his to Dylan Efron, which was a bit of a surprise because we had seen before that he and Danielle had a moment where he told her she was kind of begging him to give her the shield and it seemed like he was open to that, but then he ends up just giving it to Dylan, which I have a theory on that I think he sees Dylan Efron as his Cody Calafiore on Big Brother, where, Cody and Derek worked so closely together, and I think that he views Dylan as he's going to be his Cody, his loyal soldier this season. So I think that's probably where he was going with that.
Yeah.
And
I can see
then
that.
Wes gives his to Jeremy, which was also a bit of a surprise, but I think that makes sense because I think Wells comes from the challenge, of course, and I think Wells has seen in the challenge that Survivor players are very smart and do very well, and so I think this was kind of his way to hopefully get the survivors on his side, and so I think that was probably I think that was a smart move.
Yeah, I agree. I think Wes giving Jeremy does make sense because I mean they're both strong guys and like he could see that survivor players are good players, so it makes
Yeah.
sense there. But yeah,
All right.
now
Well,
we
and
get
move
to
on to
episode
episode 3.
yeah, so for episode 3, we start out with Rob going into the chamber to see the traitors and so now they all find out Rob is joining them, and then they decide to murder Ion. So, what are your thoughts on first seeing the reactions, seeing Rob come in, and then also having them murder Ion?
Yeah, I mean, I was a little disappointed when Rob came in because I was like, the traders, right? Those three were so chaotic together and could not get on the same page, and it was so fun. And I think Rob coming in, he's just gonna kind of take over everything at this point, and his decision is gonna be what goes. And I mean, having people like Carolyn, who's very unpredictable and not necessarily just going to bow down to anyone. Danielle's a smart player. I mean, Bob the drag queen seems like before Rob was there, he was trying to kind of be the leader of the group. So I don't think it's not like Rob has three people who are just going to do his bidding. I don't think by any means, but I could see Rob being kind of like uh, connecting them together in a way that is good for them but bad for the entertainment value.
Yeah, yeah, I
But
can see
them
that.
deciding to murder Ion, I mean, I was sad because she had some really good moments, I thought, in the first 2 episodes. And I
Yeah.
mean, Her asking Wes when she went to put the coins in their cages, and she asked Wes, "Are you on TikTok?" Like, what?
That was so funny. Well,
Like,
soon, maybe that won't matter.
yeah, in a week, nobody will be on TikTok,
Yeah.
apparently. But yeah, so I mean, she was very much like learning. She had no idea what she was getting into. So I was sad to see her go, but I mean, they're obviously trying to get the Bravo people out a bit and kind of point the eyes at another Bravo person to kind of this reverse psychology thing. But so I mean, it kind of makes sense, but I was sad.
Yeah, me too, and it was sad to see when Ion was really sad that Wells left too, because she was like,
Hmm.
"Oh, Wells was my friend, like, he understood me." So, I hope that they're still friends today, like, I want them to be friends, I don't
Yeah,
know if
I
they
mean,
are.
I've seen them kind of talk on Instagram, go back and forth a little bit. So I think that they're still friendly.
That's good, but yeah, I know, it was sad to see her go. I didn't really know her that well, but I loved her one-liners or just, like, overall, just, like, her vibe. She was just fun to watch, so, I
Yeah.
mean, I feel like they could have gone for a better choice here, but early on, with the traders choosing who to go out, like, it's hard to, like, go after certain friends or, like, like, with that many people, it's just, like, you can't it's hard to decide any week,
Well, and
but
that's the problem. That's like
yeah.
what I was saying with the fact that there's no Bravo representation in there. It makes it very easy to take them out just because everybody else is kind of has a number one or their close ally who they're gonna say is off the table, and nobody in that turret has the housewives off the table. So it's very easy to just keep picking them off because they're kind of the opposition there. So that's what's kind of disappointing about that. But yeah. Oh
Yeah.
well.
I know. Well, next up, we had the next mission. So for this one, it's entering into a fun house in pairs, and each pair has to hold a balloon, and then they face four doors. They all have different kind of designs on those doors, and they have to select the door that won't come out and pop their balloon, essentially. And so they have to go through the right door and then make it through all of them to add money to the prize pot. So as they're in there, they're talking about the design of it, each pair in there. And honestly, it was kind of surprising to me to see that when they first went in, like for the first 3 rounds, like they got all the wrong door. Like I was like thinking maybe they would go to one right door first. And then, I mean, then after that, they can communicate. So, like making sure that other teams won't make the same mistake in going to that door. But then the fourth group that goes in couldn't remember what the color of the doors were, and then they made the mistake also. So,
Yeah.
it was funny hearing Rob's, like, commentary on that. He's like, "These people don't know how to play a game. If they they couldn't get it on their fourth option here where you should be getting it here, like,
Yeah.
you tried all the doors." So this is just another point to see, like, when people are really like the gamers in the show and the not gamers, like
They
you
were
see
not
the
paying
difference in this one.
attention. Yeah, I mean, this was a disaster. And I don't know. I think that this format of a challenge has potential. It was kind of interesting. I think the creepy clowns I could have done without. But, this kind of idea of going through some sort of maze and, having to call out the directions and then, just kind of having to remember what that next team is doing. I think that has potential. I don't know that this was like the most entertaining or exciting challenge, but I could see them kind of workshopping this a bit and making it into something that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and they failed this whole mission, so they didn't even get any money for the pot. So that was also kind of disappointing. I was like, well, they tried this and then didn't even work. So,
Yeah.
but hopefully they can workshop that and get it better for next year or next season. But then we have our next roundtable, and we see that Dylan starts calling out Bob the Drag Queen. So he actually is getting a traitor on his radar. And Robin for not being the most vocal, or for being the most vocal about Wells, trying about like being a traitor there prior to the round table. So I feel like also like that Dylan was like kind of calling out some valid points there, because Like, I feel like if you are a traitor, you're trying to get out someone who's not, obviously, because then that keeps you safe. So it's interesting that he was noticing that. And then we also get
Yeah, I
that.
mean oh, sorry.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, Dylan Efron is impressing me. I mean,
Yeah,
he is I feel like a lot of people have been comparing him to Pilot Pete last season as kind of being this, like, surprise faithful that actually has some strategy behind him, whereas you kinda go into it thinking that he's just gonna be a big nothing.
yeah,
But he's obviously a fan of Survivor, so he knows these competition shows, and I think that's what kinda sets him apart from Peter to me because Peter came in and while he was very, an active game player, he didn't really know what he was doing. Like, I don't think he had ever probably seen any of those types of shows before, and he was very kind of had this, like, superiority complex and this moral compass that he was playing by is, like, the traitors are the bad guys and I would never be a traitor. And he ruined his game basically by refusing to be recruited as a traitor because he was such like the most faithful of the faithful and the Peter's pals and all this stuff that he was a part of. And so I think that Dylan is kind of like the next level of like Peter. It's like Peter 2.0, where it's like he's coming into it with the knowledge of Survivor and how to play these games. And I don't think that he has that same kind of like, oh, I would never be a traitor, because I feel like if you're a fan of Survivor, then you kind of understand that strategy and manipulation and backstabbing goes into it and probably is a little more okay with doing those things to get to the end. So I'm very interested to see Dylan continuing in this game because I think he's shown a lot of potential in these first 3 episodes.
yeah, me too. And I feel like because when someone does call out the traitors, like you can't go after that person because then that even more solidifies that then Bob the drag queen could be the one banishing him. So
Mhm.
or murdering him because they wouldn't be banished there. But yeah, so it's interesting. I'm interested to see that as well to see how he continues to suss it out and right after that round table because Bob, sorry, spoiler, but Bob drag queen is safe, so like he doesn't get banished. Like I feel like he tried to appease to Dylan, and I don't know if he believed it. He seemed like he did in that moment, but we'll have to see if he like continues to be a little bit sus about Bob the drag queen and Robin as well. But
Yeah.
then Gabby then calls out Tony for accusing Bob H. And then Jeremy was trying to defend Tony, but Rob then puts focus back onto him. And Tony ends up being banished. And he had 14 votes, so a lot more than the last week.
Yeah.
And he reveals that he's also a faithful, which I feel like to get out Tony here, like, I guess it makes sense that he could be suspicious because of him just being such a good strategic player from Survivor that you don't really know what you're gonna get. And even though we knew he was a faithful, like he could have been a traitor easily. So I think it made sense to vote for him here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Tony is one of those people that I would be suspicious of
Mhm.
just off the bat immediately because I think that he's somebody who they would make a traitor potentially. In
Yeah.
another world, like I could absolutely see them picking Tony as a traitor just because that would be really entertaining and fitting for his character. And like he would definitely be somebody that I would have my eye on there. So no pun intended, eye on. But I yeah, I mean, like I get it. But I think a lot of it is just his reputation and not necessarily anything that he particularly did during this season. But
Yeah.
I mean, Jeremy called it out. Jeremy said that he was not suspicious of him, and Jeremy is somebody who I would listen to in this because he's played with Tony before and he knows Tony, and I could absolutely see I would trust Jeremy's like I think that's how I would play this game. Just if I were to be a faithful and play this game, I would really trust the people's opinions who have been on shows with them before because they know these people in a different environment where they're not a traitor and can probably say a lot more like I would have trusted Janelle's opinion of Dan because Janelle's like, look, last season like I lived with Dan for, days and like weeks and weeks and I know him and I know that he's acting different than normal. And so like
Yeah.
I would trust that opinion and listen to that over other people's opinions who don't know them.
Yeah, I mean, well, last season also with Phaedra and all of her friends from Housewives, like, they were always defending her and being like, "Well, couldn't be Phaedra,"
That's true.
and then Phaedra was a traitor, so
That's true, but also, yeah, I mean,
those
maybe
are
I
some
would
good
say that more
friends.
in the gamers, I would say I would
Yeah.
trust, but,
Okay,
like,
true.
the
Well, so
Housewives, I
yeah,
don't know that they
Survivor
have the best
players, you
intuition.
trust them, but not
Yeah, I
the
don't yeah.
Housewives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know that the Housewives have the best intuition with that, but,
Yeah. Well, they're doing okay. Not really,
uh,
but
yeah, I mean, last season, I thought a lot of them did very well. I mean,
the
like,
last season
well, Phaedra did.
yeah. And also, I feel like we haven't seen all, like, anything with Sierra from Summer House. Like, she's, like, been not vocal. I almost forgot she was on this season. Like, I mean, like, I know she's
She
there, but she
She had
hasn't
a
been
couple of
vocal.
moments at the round tables. Like, I think we've seen a little bit more of Sierra than we have of Brittany,
Yeah.
but they're both definitely flying under the radar right now. But yeah, I mean, we haven't seen a lot of Sierra for sure. But like, there's a couple moments at the round table where she was trying to get, I forgot which round table it was, but she was trying to get some other people to throw out names that hadn't yet. Like, she spoke up a bit, but yeah,
Yeah.
not a ton.
Yeah, I wanna see her more, though, because I feel like she
I do
has
too.
more opinions that we
And I think
haven't.
she's smart. Like, I think that
Yeah.
she probably like, I could see her, like, later on in the season actually having good reads and calling out some of these traders. So I hope she makes it far because I think she's somebody who has a lot of potential.
Yeah. Me too. So maybe it's just a slow start for her, but
Yeah.
we'll have to get
It's
more of her.
probably smart to lie under the radar, listen to people, gather some information before calling anyone out too hard because you don't want to do that and be wrong because then you get looked at, as we're saying, as the next target. So,
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I would be like that, where I just, like, try to listen about what's going on and
yeah. But you
gather
don't wanna you wanna
opinions.
kinda give some opinions because you don't wanna be like Dan Giesling. That was
Yeah.
his mistake last season, was not saying anything ever, and then
Mhm.
people were suspicious of him because he's not calling anyone out, and it's like, you gotta say something. You gotta traitor hunt with us.
Yeah.
You need to give some information because otherwise that's very suspicious.
Yeah, so there's kind of a balance there, and it's
Yeah.
obviously, it's hard to toe that line, so we'll see what happens, but exciting part of the episode. At the end of this episode, we see that the traders receive a note stating that they must choose 3 players on a short to give a short list to murder, and then it must be done in plain sight, which we were excited to see. I mean, I was excited to see that because we like those murders in plain sight because that makes it hard. Because what we were saying from last season and those seasons of the traders, that it's really easy. The traders have it really easy if they're just going into their chamber and just picking off people. Like, they're not that suspicious of, like, you can't tell of like what's going on or who you're choosing. So this really does make it a lot harder. So they have to then publicly put the players in the coffins and put a nail in one of the coffins to murder them. So that's gonna be an interesting twist we're about to see. So who do you think should be on their list?
Well, I mean, kind of first before I say that, like, I think going back to what you said, yeah, I mean, I loved the murder in plain sight last season. This is a little bit different. I don't know. I think I just prefer it be a murder in plain sight rather than a short list in plain sight because this wasn't really in plain sight either. I
Yeah,
mean, if you're in like a secret room doing it, but I guess like you have to be able to get out of there without anyone finding you, which we see might be easier said than done.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, I just think I think what I liked about the murder in plain sight was that it did allow people to look back and say, "Oh my god, what did somebody do that was suspicious?" Because they didn't know what it was that murdered them. Like they never got that information. And so it made some accusations like against Larsa. I remember there was an accusation that like Larsa did something that was suspicious. I think Janelle said and people were able to kind of like accuse each other and be like, oh my gosh, well, do you remember when somebody held this or drank this or whatever, like maybe that was the murder. So like I loved that about it, and I feel like with this we're probably not going to get something quite like that. So I still liked it, it was fine, but I think I prefer that they go back to what they did last season, something more similar. But
yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, they didn't keep it very subtle though, of them going into that book room or the, like, behind the library, I don't know.
the wine cellar was it
Yeah, the
called, I
wine
think maybe.
cellar,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
but
I mean, and also, like, I think, I was listening to Tamara Judge's recap, who was on last season, and
Mhm.
she was saying that in that castle, the wine cellar is really close to the bar, so it's hard to get in there. If anyone's at the bar, you can't get into the secret wine cellar without people noticing. So it's really hard because you have to wait for a moment when nobody's at the bar, which there's only like 3 rooms or something that they can go into. So during this time, so it's kind of hard to get a moment where nobody's in there. So she said that this was actually probably a lot harder than it maybe looked to pull off.
Okay. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I
But
don't know who they're gonna put on their list, but I
yeah,
don't
I
want it to
think
be any Survivor people. That's my priority.
well, it kind of sounds like Jeremy is going to be on
I
there. It seemed
know.
like Danielle, because Danielle was told that Jeremy was suspicious of her. So I think
Mhm.
that Jeremy will probably be on there. I don't think they're going to end up putting any of the traitors on there. It sounded like they were trying to get maybe Carolyn to volunteer for that, but I don't think she's going to do that. I could see maybe like Sandoval,
Yeah.
maybe I don't know, maybe somebody kinda like, Robin or Dolores. I don't know, I could see them doing something like that where it's, like, 3 people that are kind of from, like, various sectors of the reality TV universe to not kind of throw any suspicion, like, kinda give cause chaos in there and not
Yeah.
have any, like, one direction
Yeah.
being pointed at.
Agreed, and we'll have to see that, but also, right at the very end of the episode, as soon as, like, there's some, like, chatter, stuff going on, Gabby is walking in to the room and hears conversations happening, and then Carolyn and who was it? Danielle walking out together? Or
Yeah, I don't remember exactly, but yeah, 2
so
of them
they
I think
start
were
walking
walking out.
out, and it seems like Gabby might still be near there. I don't know where Gabby is. We kind of get a cliffhanger there of seeing her just hearing stuff, but not seeing anyone yet. So we'll have to see what happens if she catches them or like if she has that information, she's going to keep it, if she's going to share it, what's going to
Mhm.
happen there. It will be really interesting to see that. So, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see because, like, on one hand, I'm like, there's no way. Like, this is editing. Like, she didn't really catch them. But also, then that's really disappointing cliffhanger if it ends up being absolutely nothing. So, my thought is, like, maybe because it still looks like she walks in and then walks out and then thinks she's hears something. So then she walks back in and then it cuts. So we don't know. But my guess is maybe she'll come out being like, "Oh, I think I heard a noise," or like something like that, where she like maybe she'll like have heard something but not know if she actually heard anything suspicious or not, and then it kind of ends up being like yeah, a nothing burger. But I'll be curious. Yeah, I'm engaged. I'm curious to see what happens.
Same. I feel like because of that cliffhanger though, like I feel like it has to be something. Like I don't know if they would have shown it to
Yeah.
us if it wasn't anything.
Yeah,
So
because it's enough
maybe.
of a cliffhanger to, like, be like, "Who are they gonna put on the list?" Like, I feel like that's enough of a cliffhanger, so the fact that they, like, added this makes me think that maybe there's something that happens with it, but who
Yeah.
knows?
Well, I love Gabby and I hope that she makes it far. So maybe this will help her
Abby's great
solidify.
on this show too, yeah.
Yeah.
She's
Maybe
been
she'll be
really
like, okay,
fun.
well I know who it is. Like I guess I can make them get to the end and then I'll vote them out then. Like
Yeah, I'm rooting for the Bambis.
yes, go
Chrishell,
babe.
Gabby, Nikki, I like their little trio.
I like them too. And hopefully the traders don't like kick them out because like they are kind of clicky and like, sometimes they don't like when there's certain alliances like that.
Mhm.
But I don't know.
If
I
they
hope
do
they
that, I
don't.
hope they get out Nikki because she's the one I know the least of those
Yeah.
3.
So if they choose one of them, just choose Nikki.
Yeah,
But we'll have to see what happens. I'm looking forward to our next drop. How many episodes are in this next drop?
just 1, it's 1 per week now.
Okay, now it's one per, yeah. So we had the first three, which was exciting to see, which obviously we binged all of them the same day.
Oh,
But
yeah.
and now we can wait and watch this one, and we'll have to keep waiting each week now. But of course, if you're not watching Traders, please watch it
Oh my
because
god.
it is great.
I was just
Um,
recommending it to people this
yeah,
morning. So, yeah,
you gotta get
it's
on
great.
it. And you just got spoiled for the first 3 episodes, but it's still gonna be great.
Yeah.
So
I don't know many people that went an hour into this, of our recap without having watched it before, but if you did, please go watch before we talk about the next one because it's definitely worth it. But
Yeah,
now we have
for sure.
another show that I think is much worth watching that I also am newly pretty obsessed with.
Yes. So for Deal or No Deal Island, this is season 2. So they had their first season last year, which we both started it, but I never actually fully finished the season.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed it like from the start of the season. I remember from last year, like enjoying it, but I just think there were so many things going on at that time that I just didn't keep it up. But for this season, I was excited to see just hopefully now I'll continue and actually watch the whole season. But the premiere episode I really enjoyed, and I feel like overall, like we have some good characters this season as well, which is good for this type of show. And we have Parvati as well, and David, who was on Survivor Australia. So, what are your thoughts first on the premiere episode?
I loved it. I think that this is a fun format. I think Parvati's a fantastic choice to hook Survivor viewers to go on to watch this. I mean, David Golden God. I am not super familiar with Australian Survivor yet. I do plan to watch that at some point. I'm currently my international binge right now is Big Brother Canada 12. So, but after I finish that, maybe I'll go watch one of David's Australian Survivor seasons if I can find it. But I really liked it. I think that this was a really fun premiere. I mean, a an all-time exit here, I
Yeah.
think. So, I'm excited to talk about that. But, yeah, I think this was a really fun premiere episode.
Yeah. For sure. And I'm excited to see Parvati because I feel like so far, like she's been doing really well.
Mhm.
And it's always fun to see that they're still keeping the trend of bringing someone big. Because last season was Boston Rob, so
Yeah.
this season is Parvati. So and I mean, and now and David, but like no one really knows David, so it's
People do. Survivor
well,
there's a lot of Survivor fans who are really excited about, DG being on this season. I've
okay.
heard a lot of excitement, especially because and this is maybe a little spoiler, but after filming this, both Parvati and David went to go film Australian Survivor Australia versus the World.
Oh,
So this is only the start of their relationship that it's kind of crazy that, like, Deal or No Deal Island will impact another Survivor season that's coming soon in the future. So
oh,
I'm excited to closely watch their relationship throughout this season to know kind of what we're getting into with the next one.
yeah. Oh, that will be exciting then to see their relationship kind of form here and then go into a new season of Survivor.
Yeah. And I think what's also interesting is that I feel like with Boston Rob, this was also the case, but I think especially at least with Parvati this season, it feels like we're getting kind of a return to form for these Survivor players who, like, I think with Parvati, Parvati was incredible in her Micronesia Heroes Villains era. And then a long time after that, she came back for Survivor Winners at War. And, she was a little bit of an early out. I think made it like 6 episodes or so. Like she did fine, but like, was pre merge and then comes on to Traitors, certainly is very popular and explodes, but she, also kind of middle boot there. She didn't, make it all the way to the end here. And I think like it feels like this season, I feel like she's just like back to her normal self. Like this feels like she's confident. She's, fully embracing her inner Black Widow again. And I think we're going to get a really good run from Parvati here.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm excited for this season. But first, though, let's talk about this premiere episode before we get in.
Yeah.
Before we see the rest of the season, we don't know what's going to happen. But for this first excursion, it's called the Pyramid Scheme. Basically, it's Banker's Pyramid Scheme of $5 million worth of cases total. But there are different ways to get those cases. So there are 3 different sides you can go through, and they're each different strategies. So the path to get there just it determines which cases you can choose. So side 1 is the highest value cases, and that's up to $1 million. And then to get there, they just must navigate a slippery path over some water. And then a slide 2 is in the middle value cases, and they can get there through the jungle path. And then slide 3 they're red and mystery cases. This is the biggest strategy, or the hardest ones or not the hardest, the biggest risk here, and they can either be good or bad. They can be a steal, a swap, or a lowest value, and to get to those, that is a zip line. So there are a bunch of different options there. There's three options there, but which one do you think you would have chosen?
I think I would probably have gone with the highest value cases, the slippery path over water one. I think that probably is the smartest. Well, I don't know. It's hard to know. I think this was interesting because it's like if they actually if the zipline team had played correctly here, they may have been able to win out, but I don't know. I think in that case if they had done that, then I think even so, I don't know, maybe I'm not a mathematician, but I think maybe then the like middle, the kind of like the what is that called? The jungle path team may have been the lowest and not the slippery rocks team. I don't know. I'm not sure which one would have lost if like the mystery case team had done the best they could have done, like made the smartest choices possible for them. But maybe that's the smart move. Maybe if you're able to do that correctly, I don't know, then maybe that one's actually the best one to pick. But I don't know. What would you have
Yeah.
done?
I know it was interesting to watch it and like just see what was going to happen because I mean at the end then they have to add up their values, and so then the jungle team reveals their case values and that totals up to 1.6 million, and then for the zipline team, he oh so that Luke was in that as well as David and what's her, how do you say her name again,
Seychelles, I think, yeah.
Seychelles, yeah. So they are able to steal, and or so Luke is able to steal and he decides to take Rock's case, which is the highest of the middle group case. So that's like the highest value of the lower value of the cases, which the lower
Yeah, the
value of
ones
the
that
cases,
they had seen
the
already,
ones
the
that they've
ones that
seen.
had been opened, yeah, he
Yeah.
took the highest one that he knew that already had been opened.
Yeah. And so for those that made sense for him to steal that one.
Well, no, it
But
didn't make sense, that's the
well,
thing, it actually didn't because
yeah.
of the lowest value of the highest what are they calling them?
Oh, the middle
The middle,
or
the highest, the slippery rocks team or whatever you
yeah.
call it, they hadn't opened their cases yet, but the
Oh,
lowest one of theirs was higher than 450,000. So actually, if he had
oh.
picked any of those, he would have gotten higher, but I guess maybe he didn't know that, but I don't
That's
know.
what I was guessing. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
was like, I didn't think I think if he knew he could have taken one of the ones that wasn't opened, I think he would have. But I guess it wasn't totally clear in that moment that he could have taken those. So he just
Mhm.
went with the highest of the lowest, which was lower, as you said. So it
Yeah.
wasn't really very smart there. But with his knowledge, I guess in that moment, maybe it did make the most sense. I don't know.
I guess if he didn't have all the information that he
Yeah.
needed to make that smart decision, then maybe he thought that that was, but I don't know. I feel like they must have explained the rules to them a lot more than they
Yeah.
did to us. So I can't imagine he didn't know that.
I don't know. But then we see that David has the swap and that his case was 200,000, but they with the middle with the what do they call it? The Jungle Path group,
Yeah.
they had a case with $1 million, and so while they were getting those cases, they swapped them out to each other in they circled around, like they just like moved around the cases in the water so that in case he were to look and watch, which was Parvati's idea,
Hmm.
first of all,
Not
was
Sydney's, as
not
she tries to take
Sydney's.
credit for later.
Yeah, I know. And so that was a really smart move because then they like knew where the $1 million was, but David didn't, even though he thought he did. But Sydney tries to set him up and succeed to say, like, okay, you'll get one of our cases that will make you a top two team, which
Hmm.
like means you won't go up to the what the to meet the
Meet the
banker,
banker, yeah.
and someone from the other team would have to go in there. But David decides not to listen to Sydney and takes the case that was the one that switched. That Sydney and Lacey switched, so it was not with the $1 million where he thought that Lacey had. and it was 500,000 instead. So then the zipline team's total was 1,025,000, which because Shay Shell had the lowest case with $20,000. But then the Rocky team ends up with their totals of 2.55 million. So that was a lot more than theirs. And so because of that, the zipline team ends up being the one to have to face the banker. And since oh, so on the highest, yeah, with Sydney having the highest value because she had the $1 million, she got immunity and could choose which of those three players would play Deal or No Deal.
Yep.
So there was a lot happening there. So there were a lot of numbers and a lot of people,
I
but
know it is
overall,
kind of confusing. Like, I
yeah,
feel like I there were certain rules that I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize this was the case until, like, they did it." Like, they said it. Like, I didn't realize, honestly, that the zipline team, Luke, Seychelles, and David, were the only ones vulnerable to even get picked to be eliminated.
yeah,
If Luke had won his game of Deal or No Deal, like, I thought he could choose between anyone except Sydney, but I guess it turns out that he could have only picked between Seychelles and David. So I
yeah,
didn't even realize that until like late into the episode. But yeah, so that was a pretty big mistake there
yeah.
that
I
they
know.
made
And he
both
had the
times.
option to not make that mistake. So that
Oh
was
my
what he was
god, yeah,
interesting.
and I mean, like, I just feel like both David and Luke were not smart here with their
Yeah.
choices because Luke should have chosen one of the Rocky Path team's cases, and David should have taken Sydney's offer to, I think it was $750,000 case.
Yeah.
So yeah, neither of those were, or was it? No, sorry, it wasn't Sydney. It was Letty's
Yeah.
deal. I think
Letty's
that she
case.
gave him. Yeah,
Yeah. It was funny because or not that funny, but it was interesting to see, like, the guys, like, thinking that they're doing like, they need to stick true to, like, what they believe in and all this stuff, and it's obviously, like, their gut was wrong. Both of them.
yeah.
So so that was the downfall of the men in this episode.
We love a downfall of a man.
Yes. So that was entertaining at least. But then we just have more conversations, like, after that happened, just see Sydney choosing who she wants to choose, but Sydney has the love for David, so it
Oh
seemed
my
pretty
god.
obvious that she was
He is a
not
married
choosing him.
man.
What?
He is a married man,
I
and yeah,
know.
I don't
Yeah,
think that he appreciates that too much, but
yeah.
it's really funny to watch. Like, Sydney's great TV. I mean,
Oh,
she's
yeah,
a lot of the actually, like, I really like a lot of the civilians, I guess, if you will, here. Like, the people that are not Parvati and David. I think that there's some really good casting choices that they made here. It's a fun group.
yeah, agreed, I like them as well. Sydney did get a lot on my nerves a little bit, and I feel like with the rest of the cast, she was too,
Yeah.
which is, like,
Like,
reasonable.
Seychelle is a really big character, it seems
Yeah,
like. I really like her, and I think Letty's gonna be a good player, it seems like. So,
yeah, I really
I mean,
like
Luke was
Letty.
really fun to watch this episode, so, I mean, there's whether they're, all great game players or not, I think there's a lot of fun personalities.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, I think maybe as the season goes on, like, they'll learn the game a little bit better,
Yeah,
like, I think this is still the very first episode of this season, and they said they had watched the previous season, but, like, that's only 1 season, like, you don't really know entirely, like, every season could change somewhat, and, like, the
right.
games change, so it all depends on each season that you're on, so we'll have to
Yeah,
see how
and
it
we
continues.
have next episode, one Dr. Will Kirby is joining the group, so
Ooh,
that's going to be interesting because, talk about characters.
yeah,
Dr. Will is a character, and he's also a very good game player, as we've seen. So I'm very interested to see his reality TV return after 18 years, 19 years almost. It's
oh,
been
wow.
since his last time playing Big Brother. So the fact that he's making his big return on Deal or No Deal Island, I mean, is really kind of wild. The fact that they're able to get these huge names on this show, like, that says a lot about, I'm sure, whether it's their production team that, I don't know what it is, but they're doing a great job of casting some really big names here.
Yeah. Well, also speaking of the big names though, with Parvati, some people do recognize her who are Survivor fans. So she tries to say like, "Oh yeah, like I haven't told anyone. Like you're the only one who knows." Like keeping it a secret, even though it's not a secret between her and the people that she's talking to.
Very smart.
Yeah. So I think that was really smart of her to do. I don't know if then they're gonna go and talk to other people, but for right now, it seems like no one's really talking about it to others, so seems
Well,
like she's in the clear.
I think what is so smart about it is the fact that she makes them feel like this is our secret. This is our
Yeah,
little secret that, please don't tell anyone. Like, I'm going to work with you. Like, the people love to feel like they are holding a secret that only they know about something, or someone. And I think that she's made each of them feel so important and special in the fact that they shared this connection, that they recognize her. And so the fact that she's been able to do that, we've seen with multiple people, is, I think, really, really smart and puts her in a very strong position here.
yeah, agreed. And then Parvati, she's the only one who actually recognizes David from Australian Survivor, so he's not as much of like a, "Oh, I'm a big name person," even though you said, like, he is pretty famous. But that also gives her an in with David there because then they were both, like, strong players together, essentially.
Yeah.
But I'm excited to see how that evolves, and as you said as well, they're gonna be playing another season of Survivor together, so that's gonna be fun.
And it feels like
Um,
David is, like, a big fan of Parvati's, and he's
yeah,
starstruck to see her as well. And so I think, like,
yeah,
he obviously is probably looking at it with a much more strategic view, than probably the others are, because he's played Survivor twice, I believe, and won one of those seasons. And so he's a very strategic player, and he recognizes the fact that, that Parvati is a good ally for him to have, because she's probably one of the only ones who can really strategize on the same level. But I think there's also a little part of him that's like a little starstruck, a little, having a little crush on her or something. Like, I feel like there is that little part of him that probably is kind of eager to just play with her because she's Parvati, and he's someone that he's watched for such a long time.
yeah, for sure. But then we get to the end of the episode where we see who Sydney chooses to play Deal or No Deal, and she chooses Luke, which was not a surprise to me. I don't think it was a surprise to anyone there. Um,
Except that David wanted to play, it seemed
yeah,
like a bit, but
David
I
did. He
didn't think that
tried
was
to
going to
fight
happen.
it for it because he thought that then he would be sent if Luke had won, then he would be sending David home.
Yeah.
But what we see happening is that Luke ends up losing the worst ever of deal that we've ever seen happen
My God.
in the history of Deal or No Deal because he kept on getting all of the high cases, and then he had a lower case value in his case than the bank had offered. So he, because of that, like the rules are basically if your offer that you accept is higher than your case value and you say you want to stay with your case value, then you go home. If you say you'll take the offer, then you'll get to stay. But he didn't take the offer. So Luke ends up going home.
And
And
it's I mean, like,
no
Luke
money's added except for $1.
Luke had the best possible case he could have chosen, because every offer he gets is gonna be higher than his case value. So he could
Yeah.
have taken any offer the entire time that he was offered and won.
Yeah.
And it's not about how much money you add to the pot. Like, at a certain point, like, you're gonna add enough to the pot to make it a big prize, I feel like, on this show. Like, it's fine. But it's really not about that at this point. It's just about getting an offer that is higher than what's in your case so that you can stay in and choose who goes home. And so he had the best possible scenario and still screwed it up.
I know. And he just kept being greedy. And that's not the way to play that game always because then you're just going to keep getting more risky options there, and obviously that didn't turn out for him. So I was kind of sad to see Luke. Like I enjoyed watching him in the first episode. Feel like he was a good personality, but obviously he was not good at playing Deal or No Deal. So he ends up
No, he
going
was
home. And I mean, at least he didn't have to choose someone. I feel like maybe it's for the best that like because he didn't get to choose someone, then it's like he didn't have blood on his hands first time, like getting someone out and going back into the game, but it's still like it's part of the game, so that has to happen. But
Yeah, I
overall,
mean,
it just
he's
it's
a
sad.
classic first boot. Like, I just
Yeah,
feel like it would have been a shame for somebody with potential in this game to go home over him, because he clearly didn't understand what he was playing. He
yeah,
wasn't good at it. Like, I think he was very entertaining, but I think, like, a classic necessary first boot that I'm excited for him to be replaced by Dr. Will Kirby, one of the best players to ever exist in these games. So I think it'll be very interesting to see, one of the worst that potentially we've seen in quite a long time be replaced by one of the best. So I think I'm glad that he went home first, as entertaining as he was this episode.
Yeah, agreed, but we'll have to keep watching this week as well, and if you haven't started it yet, then please do start it because only 1 episode in, so we didn't really spoil too much. But I'm excited for both The Traitors and Deal or No Deal Island to continue, and it's been just exciting to watch these both these shows premiering this past week, so thanks so much for listening, everyone, and we'll talk again with y'all next week. Make sure you're subscribed to Let's Chat Reality wherever you get your podcasts, and you can follow us on Instagram and TikTok, but
Don't
maybe
follow us
not.
on TikTok right now. I mean, there's no
Yeah,
point. It's gonna
yeah,
well,
no point
unless
on
it
TikTok.
stays. We'll let you know next week if it happens to be bought
Yeah,
by another company. But
exactly. But for sure, Instagram,
yeah.
we do post every week there. So we'll talk to y'all next week. Thanks so much for listening.
Bye everyone.